Velma Barfield was convicted and sentenced to die in 1978 for the poisoning death of her boyfriend. She also admitted poisoning 3 other people, including her mother. Barfield had been awaiting her sentence in the Women's Correctional Facility in Raleigh. But last week, for security reasons, say corrections officials, she was moved to Raleigh's Central Prison, where she is the only woman prisoner. She now waits in virtual isolation in a cell just across from the execution chamber, a constant reminder, she says, of her likely fate.
It's total, isolation from everybody that I had been with for almost 6 years. The first week I was here was the worst week that I have spent. Everything
Barfield
about
says
it.
drugs led her to prison. She became addicted to tranquilizers, she says, during a rocky period in her life.
It is 2:15 in the morning, November 2nd, 1984, Central Prison, Raleigh, North Carolina. The hallways are dead quiet. Most of the city is asleep, but inside one room at the end of a long corridor, a 52-year-old grandmother is strapped to a gurney. Her wrists are bound, her legs are secured. A heart monitor is taped to her chest. She is wearing pink pajamas. Hours earlier, she had asked for cheese puffs and a Coca-Cola. She slept soundly the night before. Better, she said, than she had in years. She woke up, made coffee, and opened her Bible. She did not look like a killer. That was always the problem. Because the woman strapped to that gurney was not just a murderer. She had been poisoning the people closest to her for over a decade. Husbands, patients, her own mother. And not once, not a single time, did anyone think to look twice. By the time authorities connected the dots, at least 5 people were already dead, and the woman responsible had been caring for every one of them. In just a few moments, she would become the first woman in United States history to be executed by lethal injection. But before we get there, who exactly was Velma Barfield? And how did she get away with it for so long? Welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, this is where we cover the cases that demand to be told. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on your notifications so you never miss a story. Now, let's get into it. Stuart Taylor was not a complicated man. He was a tobacco farmer from Cumberland County, North Carolina. He woke up early, worked the land, and came home tired. People who knew him described him the same way every time: dependable, steady, and grounded. A man of routine, a man of his word. By the late 1970s, Stuart had found something that made him genuinely happy. Her name was Velma Barfield. The two had grown close, and before long, they were engaged. Friends and family said he lit up around her. He was not a man who showed his emotions easily, but with Velma, it was clear. He was looking forward to the future. He had absolutely no reason to think otherwise. What Stuart did not know, what nobody told him, was that the woman he planned to spend his life with had left a trail of death behind her. Before Stuart, there was Velma's own mother, dead in 1974 after a prolonged and painful stomach illness. Then there were Montgomery and Dolly Edwards, an elderly couple who had welcomed Velma into their home as their caregiver, both gone. Then John Henry Lee, a patient of hers whose death was recorded as a severe stomach virus. 3 people, 3 quiet deaths, all connected to the same woman. These were not strangers she had wronged. They were people who trusted her completely, people who let her into their homes, their kitchens, and their lives. Stuart Taylor had no idea that 3 people had already died in Velma Barfield's orbit. He had no idea he would be next. He just wanted a life with the woman he loved. He never got one. Velma Barfield was born in 1932 on a farm in South Carolina. She grew up modest, one of several children. Long days, little money, and the kind of upbringing that taught you to keep your head down and work hard. She eventually settled in Cumberland County, North Carolina, married young, and built what looked, from the outside, like an ordinary life. She was soft-spoken. She was religious. She cared for people professionally as a home health nurse. She was the kind of woman you called when an elderly parent needed help. The kind of woman neighbors trusted without thinking twice. Nobody suspected her, not even close. But court records would later reveal a very different picture. Her first husband, Thomas Burke, survived a serious car accident, only to die in a house fire in 1969. Authorities ruled it accidental. Velma collected the insurance money. Life moved on. Her second husband, Jennings Barfield died in 1971. The death certificate read, heart failure. He was buried, no questions asked. Looking back, a pattern was impossible to ignore. Everyone who died around Velma shared the same story: severe stomach pain, rapid decline, and a quiet death that raised no alarms at the time. Court records confirmed something else too. Velma had developed a serious prescription drug dependency. She was stealing money from the people around her to fund it. And when those people got too close to the truth, they stopped being a problem. She did not look dangerous. She looked like someone's grandmother. That was exactly what made her so deadly. By 1974, Velma had already buried 2 husbands. But she was not done. That same year, her own mother became ill. It started with stomach pain, the kind that makes a person double over and reach for anything that might bring relief. She deteriorated quickly. Then she died. Doctors recorded a stomach illness. No criminal investigation followed. No one looked further. Then came Montgomery and Dolly Edwards, an elderly couple who welcomed Velma into their home and trusted her completely. Both of them fell ill under her care. Same symptoms: severe stomach pain, rapid decline. Both died. Their deaths were recorded and filed away without a second look. John Henry Lee came next. Another patient, another stomach illness, another death certificate that pointed nowhere near Velma Barfield. Every single time, she walked away, and every single time, she gained something. Money stolen, debts hidden, and one less person who could expose her. 5 people had now died around the same woman, and not one death certificate pointed back to her. Then, in early 1978, Stuart Taylor started feeling sick. Stomach pain, weakness. He was hospitalized. His condition did not improve. Stuart Taylor died. This time, for the very first time, authorities ordered an autopsy. That decision changed everything. Here is what made Velma Barfield different from most killers. She worked alone. There were no accomplices, no middlemen, no one she paid or persuaded. Every poisoning was planned and carried out entirely by herself. No court record, not a single one, ever named a co-conspirator in any of her crimes. Her weapon was not a gun. It was not a knife. It was something far more ordinary. Arsenic-based pesticide. It was commercially available. Easy to purchase, odorless when dissolved in liquid, and in that era, virtually impossible to detect without very specific toxicology testing, the kind that was rarely ordered unless someone was already under suspicion. Court records confirmed that Velma laced Stuart Taylor's beer with the compound. She had prepared his drinks. She had access to his home. She was the last person anyone would have questioned. That was her method every single time. She was close to her victims. She prepared their food and drinks. Proximity was her weapon just as much as the poison itself. People around her had noticed something was off. Her behavior had grown erratic. Those close to her linked it to drug use, but not one person connected that behavior to the deaths happening around her. She did not need a criminal network. She needed a hardware store. That is exactly why she was so difficult to catch. If this case already has you floored, you have not heard the worst of it yet. Make sure you are subscribed so you never miss a case like this. In early 1978, Stuart Taylor had every reason to feel good about life. He was engaged. He was working his land. He was planning a future with the woman he loved. By all accounts, he was in good health and good spirits. Nothing about his day-to-day life suggested anything was wrong. But behind that picture, Velma Barfield was quietly panicking. She had been stealing money from Stuart to feed her drug dependency. The amounts had grown. The risk of him finding out was growing with them. She had been in this position before, with her mother, with the Edwards couple, with John Henry Lee. She knew exactly what she was going to do. She obtained arsenic-based bug killer, the same compound she had used before. Then she began introducing it into Stuart's beer, slowly, over a period of days, in amounts that would not raise immediate alarm. Stuart started feeling sick, severe stomach cramping, nausea, a weakness that would not go away no matter how much he rested. He pushed through at first, the way men like him often do. But the symptoms did not ease. They got worse. He was admitted to the hospital. Doctors treated him for what appeared to be a gastrointestinal illness. There was no obvious reason at that point to suspect anything other than a serious stomach condition. Velma was present throughout. She visited. She sat by his side. She played the role of the devoted, grieving fiancé without missing a single beat. Stuart Taylor's condition continued to decline. Then he died. The cause of death was listed as undetermined, pending autopsy. For the first time, investigators ordered a full toxicology report. Court records confirmed that the arsenic found in Stuart Taylor's system was entirely consistent with the pesticide compound Velma had access to. What investigators found in that autopsy report would crack open a decade of deaths, and what came next is nearly impossible to believe. Before the results were even finalized, Velma confessed. Not just to Stuart's murder. She admitted to fatally poisoning at least 3 other people. She delivered that confession without visible panic, without breaking down, without hesitation. Investigators were stunned, because in one moment, every quiet death in Velma Barfield's orbit had just become a murder case. The moment Velma confessed, nothing stayed buried. Investigators moved immediately. Every suspicious death connected to her name was pulled back out and placed under a criminal lens. The Edwards couple, John Henry Lee, her own mother. Cases that had been closed for years were suddenly wide open again. Then came the decision that confirmed what many were beginning to fear. Jennings Barfield, Velma's second husband, dead since 1971 and buried without suspicion, was exhumed. When the toxicology results came back, they found arsenic in his remains. A man who had been recorded as a heart failure case was, in fact, a poisoning victim. He had been in the ground for 7 years before anyone knew the truth. Velma was taken into custody. Charges were formally filed. Court records noted that she remained cooperative during initial questioning, almost disturbingly calm for someone facing what she was facing. In Cumberland County, the shock was immediate and deep. This was their neighbor, their caregiver, the woman some of them had sat beside in church. For Ronnie and Pam, Velma's own children, the ground had completely shifted. The woman who raised them had poisoned people they knew personally. There were no words for what that felt like. Victim families who had grieved years earlier were now being told their loved ones had not died naturally. They had been murdered. And one question was on everybody's lips. How many people had actually died because of her? Investigators had a confession. But a confession alone does not build a watertight murder case. The real challenge was evidence, and there was very little of it left. Most of Velma's victims had been buried years earlier with no arsenic testing. Their bodies had been in the ground long enough for physical evidence to degrade significantly. Reconstructing those deaths meant relying almost entirely on Velma's own statements, and whatever court records still existed from the time of each death. The exhumation of Jennings Barfield had provided the second confirmed forensic result. Arsenic in his remains gave investigators something concrete beyond Stuart Taylor's case. But for the Edwards couple, John Henry Lee, and Velma's mother, the physical trail had largely gone cold. What investigators could establish, however, was a pattern that held firm across every single case. All victims were under her direct care. All of them showed identical symptoms before death. And in every instance, the death occurred shortly after Velma found herself facing financial exposure tied to stolen money. Pharmacy records were subpoenaed. Financial irregularities were documented. The theft patterns were consistent and damning. Throughout all of it, Velma remained calm during interviews, cooperative, composed. Investigators noted her demeanor was not what they typically saw from someone staring down a capital murder charge. Prosecutors faced a difficult decision. Trying Velma for multiple historical poisonings carried enormous risk. The forensic evidence on the older cases was simply too thin to guarantee a conviction. Stuart Taylor's case was different. It was the most recent. The forensic evidence was the strongest, and it was backed directly by her own confession. Authorities made their call. Velma Barfield would stand trial for the murder of Stuart Taylor alone. The remaining deaths would stay on record, but only one case would go before a jury. Most murder cases crack because of forensic evidence. A fingerprint, a witness, a piece of physical proof that ties everything together. This was not most cases. The breakthrough in Velma Barfield's case came from one source and one source only, Velma Barfield herself. Before Stuart Taylor's autopsy had even been completed, before investigators had built a case strong enough to formally charge anyone, Velma walked in and confessed. Court records confirm it was entirely unsolicited. Nobody had cornered her. Nobody had presented her with evidence. She volunteered the information on her own terms, admitting to Stuart's murder and naming additional victims in the same breath. Investigators had not seen that coming. Her confession immediately changed everything. Formal arrest followed without delay. Charges of first-degree murder in the death of Stuart Taylor were filed against her. The confession also gave prosecutors the legal grounds to order the exhumation of Jennings Barfield. When his remains returned positive for arsenic, it corroborated exactly what Velma had told investigators and expanded the evidentiary record significantly. The additional deaths were never separately prosecuted, but they were entered into the court record. They would follow Velma Barfield all the way to trial. North Carolina prosecutors now had everything they needed: a confession, forensic evidence, and a pattern no jury would be able to walk away from. When Velma Barfield walked into that courtroom, she faced one charge: the murder of Stuart Taylor. The prosecution did not need to overcomplicate their case. They laid it out methodically and let the facts do the work. Her confession, the toxicology report confirming arsenic in Stuart Taylor's system, the financial motive rooted in stolen money and a drug habit she could not control, and the broader pattern of deaths that followed her everywhere she went. The defense had one argument. Velma's attorneys contended that her severe prescription drug dependency had so deeply altered her state of mind that she did not fully understand her actions would cause death. They asked the jury to consider that level of impairment before deciding her fate. The jury did not accept it. Velma Barfield was convicted of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to death. Her attorneys filed appeal after appeal in the years that followed, returning repeatedly to the drug impairment argument and raising broader questions about culpability. Every single appeal was denied. As a final attempt, her legal team filed clemency petitions directly with Governor Jim Hunt. They pointed to her religious transformation behind bars and argued she was a changed woman who deserved mercy. Governor Hunt denied the petition. Every legal door had been tried. Every one of them had closed. Velma Barfield spent 6 years on death row at Central Prison in Raleigh, North Carolina. In that time, something shifted in her. She became a born-again Christian. She studied scripture every day. She counseled fellow inmates through their darkest moments. She built genuine relationships with prison staff, guards, chaplains, and administrators alike. Everyone who spent time around her during those years described the same woman: composed, empathetic, more concerned about the people around her than about herself. Her clemency petitions had leaned on that transformation. They were denied regardless. On the night of November 1st, 1984, a guard quietly checked on her cell. She was asleep. She woke just after 6 in the morning, requested instant coffee, and told the guard she had slept remarkably well. She opened her Bible and began to read. When her pastor, Hugh Hoyle, arrived later that morning, he came with difficult news. Her final appeal had been turned down. "Well, that's what I figured," she said softly. A correctional officer stepped forward and handed her a yellow chrysanthemum. "A gift," he told her, "from the men of Central Prison." She accepted it without a word and held it carefully. At lunch, she ate pea soup and crackers and worked through a stack of mail and telegrams. When the chaplains sat with her, she told them not to worry about her. She asked them instead to focus on the 39 other men still on death row. Then Ronnie and Pam arrived for their final 2 hours together. Pam walked through the door and collapsed into her mother's arms, sobbing. Ronnie held himself together just long enough to hear his mother's final instructions: take care of Pam, handle the arrangements, remember the good times. When the visit ended, Pam refused to let go. It was Ronnie who gently pulled her away and told her not to look back. Her attorneys came next, each carrying a single rose. Attorney Richard Burr wept openly and told her how sorry he was. Velma comforted him. She spent her remaining hours writing personal messages inside 2 small white Bibles. Her fingers turned orange from the cheese doodles sitting beside her on the table. Then she dressed in pink pajamas. She was strapped to a gurney. Catheters were placed in her arms. The saline drip began to flow. She was wheeled into the execution chamber as witnesses watched silently through the glass. When asked for her final words, she spoke clearly and without trembling. "I want to say that I am sorry for all the hurt that I have caused. I know that everybody has gone through a lot of pain, all the families connected, and I am sorry. I want to thank everybody who has been supporting me all these 6 years." End quote. At 2:15 in the morning on November 2, 1984, Velma Barfield was pronounced dead. She was 52 years old, the first woman in United States history to be executed by lethal injection. Only one trial was ever held. The families of Stuart Taylor, Montgomery and Dolly Edwards, John Henry Lee, and Velma's own mother never saw a courtroom fight for their loved ones. They received no formal justice, only the quiet knowledge that the woman responsible was gone. Ronnie and Pam carried November 2, 1984 with them for the rest of their lives. That goodbye never leaves a person. Jennings Barfield's grave had held its secret for 13 years before anyone thought to look. 13 years of a murder dressed up as natural causes. She stole from people who trusted her completely. She killed them to protect herself, and she did it with something anyone can buy at a hardware store. She spent her final years ministering to others about the value of human life, the same value she ignored for over a decade. Make of that what you will. Which moment in this story hit you hardest? Was it the yellow chrysanthemum, the goodbye with Ronnie and Pam, or the decade of deaths that nobody questioned? Drop your answer in the comments below. If you are new here, subscribe and turn on notifications. And share this video with someone who needs to hear this story.